Okay, so now that the basic environment is set up, we're going to start tracking the player's success. So we're going to track as a total amount the total notes they got correct, as far as a percent, and as far as the longest streak. And we're going to use those numbers to have various visual things occur. So maybe we'll have like a particle system explode when they get like 10 in a row or something like that. We're also going to have audience members. So what this is if you notice this little stick figure, these are all the frames for one audience member. Once you create one, you could just copy and paste and make a bunch of audience members. I simply drew this externally and then just dragged and dropped it into the project. So let's start by making this guy. So let's go to Game Object, let's click on Create Empty, and we'll call this Music Fan. So we go to Animation, we click and highlight them all, just drag and drop it. Got to give it a name. We'll call this Fan. As you can see where it says Music Fan, you know that this is indeed attached to the correct object, because sometimes it doesn't for some reason. I don't know if it's a glitch or what, but always make sure that the frames you've dropped has actually attached to the right object. So now we can change the sample rate because we don't want it to be that fast. Now this is a cycle, so it comes all the way out, but then we want it to then reverse. So we'll just drag and drop these. So basically the person just kind of bouncing up and down, jumping up and down. So we're going to do things like have them not be moving at first because they're not terribly thrilled. And then as you get longer streaks, they're going to start becoming animated and they'll jump around even faster. So it's very basic, but as long as you get the idea of how to transfer success rates into some other kind of effect. So it's like, okay, they got 10 in a row, then it triggers a certain effect. In this case, it's going to trigger an animation. So now, you don't see anything because we don't have any sprites there yet, but when we run it, you'll see that they're jumping. Not very fast, which is fine, because we want to make them move faster based on successes. So now, the second thing that we need to do is we are going to take that first frame again and put it onto the sprite. The reason for that is because we're going to actually have this pause at the beginning. I'm thinking we're not going to have them moving at all until you start playing, and then we're going to have them start jumping around. And that's purely an arbitrary decision. You could have them moving maybe slowly or have an entirely different animation cycle, but then as the player starts doing better, then the animation cycle plays faster or switches to a different animation cycle. Again, this is just the broad strokes of seeing people react. So now what we want to do is now we need to keep track of score. So we're going to need a game object for that, and we'll just call this score text, if I could spell. Now we're going to click on Add Component, Physics 2D. Actually, nah, we'll just do a text mesh. And character size, got to drop that down to like 0.2. Anything bigger than that, and it gets blurry for some reason. Font size, let's try 26. Font, Arial. The other stuff you really don't have to change at the moment. You can change the color if you want. And now what we'll do is we'll put in, we'll type the word score with a colon. Now you don't actually have to do that because we're going to have a script change what this reads, but if nothing else, to line everything up. So main camera, you can see that okay, it's kind of low. That's pretty good. Let's just move our music fan over. I haven't duplicated him yet because I'm not sure if I'm going to attach a script to him yet. Okay, so we've created an object that is going to display your score. We've got an audience member who is going to change behavior based on your performance. So now we need to actually start doing some numerical tracking to make a decision what the audience member is going to do and to show what number gets displayed up here. So, song control is attached to guitar. So guitar is really working as the game master in this particular scene because this is really controlling the notes and it's transferring information to the other objects. So what we'll do is we're going to create some more static objects. So public static int, and it's going to be total correct. It starts at 0. Public static int best streak. So as far as consecutive ones, right? And public static int total notes. Just in case you decide that each song is going to have a different amount of notes, if you want to do a %, you're going to have to know how many total notes, because a % would be the total correct divided by the total notes. Now if you're going to have every song have the same amount of notes, then you don't need this because it's going to be what's known as a constant. It's just going to be a number that you can divide into this, but we'll get to that in a minute. And I don't know why this is indenting like this. I don't know if a preference changed or what, but it doesn't affect anything, but visually I like to see it lined up. Alright, so we've created those 3 variables. They're static because they need to be accessible throughout the entire application. And so the total correct, so the total correct within one song, the best streak, so the total consecutive, or should I say the best consecutive streak, and then the total notes within the given song. And okay, so that has been saved. So now what we want to do is we now want to start some connectivity. We said that the guitar is acting like the GM object, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable so that the guitar object is aware of score text and then can manipulate it. Now, in between videos, I think I built this out a little bit. I have all 6 keys designated now, so the first string is A, and then S, and then D, and then F, G, H. I'm pretty sure I did that between videos. And as far as how to do that, again, you're doing that here in the GM, in song control, which is acting as a GM, because it is attached to guitar. So I added, actually those are the destroys, right here, sorry, the keys. So I think in the last video I only had ASD, so I just added FGH. Really no need to have to show that on video. That's just rinse and repeat. Okay, so what we're going to do is, like I said, we want the guitar object to be aware of the score text. So to do that, we have to add a variable. So let's do public transform, and it's going to be we'll call it score obj, score object. We save that, and now the variable will appear, score object. So just drag and drop. So by doing that, the guitar object is now aware, for want of a better term, of the score text object and can now manipulate it. So in the fixed update section, you can just put in a command that says score object, that's the variable we just used, dot get component. So that should look familiar because we've done other get component commands. So by prefacing get component with the name of a variable, what you've done is you're saying, okay, I want to get a component but of the variable. Because if you don't use a variable name, you just do get component, it'll get a component of whatever the script is attached to, which is the guitar. We don't want that. We want it to get the component of the score text, so we use that variable. So score obj.getComponent. So what component do we want? We want the text mesh. We want the text attribute, and it's going to be score. And then what we're going to append to that is pretty sure you don't have to use the name of the script since we're in that script. If you were trying to access this variable from another script, you would have to address this one. But just to be safe, so we want to display total correct. So it should just show 0. Perfect. Now, what we're going to do is when a note is successfully destroyed, so that's the update section of the note control script, and this too, make sure you expand because I believe I left this with only 3 or 4. I still only have 4 here. I have to make sure you do all 6 notes, so A, B, C, D, E, F. Anyways, this is already looking for a successful destruction because if destroy A is set to yes, which happens when you have 2 things going on, you're clicking on the correct key and the corresponding note is ready to be clicked on. That's where this gets set. So it's saying if that's been accomplished and the game object is a corresponding note, then go ahead, and it's in the right position, sorry, it has to be right vertical position, then go ahead and destroy the object that the script is attached to. Since this is the note control, it's attached to the notes. So destroy the note and then instantiate the green burst. So since we already have a routine for the successful note, then this is where we track the successful note. So song control dot total correct plus equals 1. We're just going to increase it by 1. Now we save it. Okay, so just took a break there for a moment because we're having an issue and I couldn't quite figure out what was wrong, and now I did. So we can continue, but I'm thinking that maybe after this video I might just do a whole new series. This video series was more popular than I expected it to be. I was kind of just doing a one-off, but since you guys want to see this through, what I'm thinking about doing is over this weekend maybe starting from scratch in Unity 5, because at this point I've had to make a couple course corrections and I can understand if this would be kind of a mess to follow, but ultimately what was happening, okay, so before the break you saw me add in the counter. The problem is the counter was failing once it hit the number 5. It occurred to me a couple things. A, the variable to destroy the note wasn't being reset. So in here we say, okay, if the note's in the right place and the corresponding key is being pressed, then trigger the destruct sequence. part of the destruct sequence should be to reset this back to no, or else every note in every type of this note going forward would auto destruct. So that's the first course correction, is that, and that really should have been in since like the second video, or really the first video. So first there's that. Second of all, the reason why it wasn't going past 5, and I'm not 100% sure yet, but it has to do with the values in the list. That if they're too close, so I don't know if there was an overlap issue, but if they're too close, the counting wasn't working. So it was the 5th variable, and I don't remember what it was, but once I made a larger gap, it took care of that. So I'd have to do some more testing to figure out what the exact gap was. But as you can see, I changed these to 1, 10, 100, and 1,000, so I could see exactly which ones weren't working and which ones were. And process of elimination, I was able to determine that if the notes are too close together, it wasn't counting. So you'll see now that it works. Okay, so we're having this variable be incremented by 1 in the note control, and we're going to set the corresponding note variable to be set back to no. So increasing total control, total correct impacts this. So in song control, this is where we put the score object.get component, and we're modifying this. This was something else that I added, because usually it occurred to me that a value, when you try to print a numeric value in a text field, you usually get an error message and it tells you that it can't convert it. So sometimes you have to put that after a number. It doesn't seem to matter in this case for some reason. So as you can see up there, it will work now. Oops. Now, obviously, the notes being that close isn't much of a challenge, so we'll have to do some testing to see. My guess is if the notes actually overlap each other vertically or horizontally, my guess is that's what breaks it. And as I say that, I noticed that it actually did not score the last 2 notes, but I'm pretty sure I know what's wrong now. Just testing. And it really is a great teachable moment when it comes to the structure of the script. So let's just make sure this is working. Because after my first couple tweaks, I noticed that it was counting, but it would always be off by 2. And now it's not. So ready for the big reveal? It was this. Because the text to change it, I didn't mean to. Oops, sorry, not trying to drag that over. But see this parenthesis? It matches up with this one. And right here is where the text was being changed. So it was only being changed while this was running. So by putting it outside of that, it's now updating correctly. So it's possible that the score was actually increasing, this just wasn't updating. And that's a really great distinction to understand. And it's really important why you do, as I mentioned before, the debug log, where you have values be printed into the debug log. We probably would have caught that sooner. So that's what was going wrong, was this was inside of this loop, and therefore it wasn't working as intended. So this value was probably being updated, but it wasn't being transferred into this object. So definitely an excellent point of distinction between whether or not a variable is actually being increased, or that variable is being transferred into, in this case, a text object. So I think that's about it for this video. I'm still thinking that I'm going to just make a new series from scratch, because like I said, I've done a bunch of course corrections, and and I really kind of want to make this a clean start, so not jumping all over the place like I have been. And like I said, I also kind of want to do game controller support and maybe spruce the way things up a little bit. Actually putting it in Unity 5 won't make much of a difference, but might make a few things here and there, so that should do it.